Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Call Call Haloyim Yahweh Bahashem, Yahushai Bahashem, Rakwadas. This is not a digital epistle to the 12 tribes of Israel. You know, double honors to the men to the men's labors that to whom the men's labors. you double honors to the men whom which labors we entered in.
Joe Biden is not only dumb and incompetent, I believe that he has gone mad, a stark, raving lunatic with his horrible and country-threatening environmental open borders and DOJ, FBI weaponization policies. He is a mental catastrophe that is leading our country to hell. We'll end up in World War III because of this man, and for no reason whatsoever.
I'm joined today by Mr. Legendary Energy himself, Anomaly. Yeah, I liked campaign Trump. Trump had a lot of good things to say, leading us into World War III. In fact, he was particularly referencing Joe Biden's strikes on Yemen with that talk. So we're now striking Yemen over the past 48 hours. We've launched multiple airstrikes against them, and Trump sent out a tweet which.
Revelations 13:11, and I beheld another beast come up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So nobody nobody condemns this man more than his own lips. His own leadership system. So his own system is exposed by lies because through this fake and it's a heavy ritual, and it shows you how delusional people are. People get caught up in these politics. Oh, Trump is pro-Jews. And people talk about what Trump supporters feel. It doesn't matter whatever Trump supporters think. Even if they will use Trump as a reason, not they didn't get the juice, but they fold when they get sick. I gotta give it to my family. You should have died then. You were better off. You were better off dead. But it's like they could play these games with these politics, and they setting up people's idols, but these people don't even believe what they say, and they have a system which condemns themselves because they'll say they'll do all in which what they will do, and it shows you everything that they do is a lie just to gain your trust, and you'll still support. You'll still support another candidate, whether you like the party or you don't like the party. You're just gonna switch, you might just switch parties. Either way, you just keep getting in the system. Job 15, 6. Thine own mouth condemn thee, not I. Yet thy own lips testify against thee. And everything that these people say is to testify against them. It's like you would say, I like campaign Trump. As I've been saying in multiple videos, the best political candidate ever. Run. He has the best campaign. Spin more truth than any politician. Obama and Hillary created ISIS. You don't think we kill a lot of people too? You don't think we do a lot of bad things out there too? But you won't really have a real moralist in the house. But two horns, they come up with their two parties, and people are running between, like, one is gonna lead them, one is gonna lead literally to salvation. I want liberation of all people now. Nothing I want more in life. But and they really come as a lamb. People think that the democracy is basically it's basically Yahushua, it's salvation. That's the democracy. He is salvation. But it obviously always leads to dictatorship because you can't. Most people are wrong. Most people are bad. Most people are evil. Most people aren't good. Most people don't have good moral.
Which I will read to you.
Most people don't have good moral character. But they come as salvation, come as a lamb, but they speak as a dragon through their military.
Guys, in a second, but before I do that, the point of the tweet is that he's getting real feisty with Iran, which has always been my greatest concern. What are your thoughts, man? I know you have been as pessimistic or as skeptical, I should say, as I have. What are you feeling?
I feel like I'm optimistic. I guess it just doesn't always translate to politics because they always, stab us in the back. But I mean, when it comes to Iran, it's important to know the deep state for decades has wanted a war with Iran. The neocons have wanted a war with Iran. The war pigs and the war hawks have wanted a war with Iran. The Uniparty has wanted a war with Iran. I would say the media has pushed for a war with Iran. People like Netanyahu and others have been in front of Congress kind of egging on or at least saying that this was inevitable, hoping that the United States would get involved with a war with Iran. So, with that being said, I think a lot of people that like Trump are hoping that he has a plan or perhaps a strategy like the first time where it seemed like he was getting kind of close, but nothing really ever popped off. I would say this on the campaign trail. There was that second killer who had a lot more info on him. The first attempted killer, like Ryan, I forget his name. Maybe it was Ryan Ruth, or maybe that was the second one. I think
It was Crooks.
Crooks was the first one. Yeah, there was like nothing on that guy. And then the second one, he had a lot of videos. He had a lot of interviews, like on YouTube, where he had served in the Ukrainian military from America, and then he was used to recruit former terrorist organizations to something like to I think like
Afghani fighters.
Afghani Taliban members trying to get them to work with Ukraine. And then when all that happened, I'm not saying that for sure that was done on behalf of Ukraine because it really could have not been. I don't know that for sure. This guy could have been rogue. But when Trump he tweeted Iran did it, that's when I was like, okay, Trump's going to probably try to start a war with Iran because when he was running for office and it seemed like he was going to stop or prevent the war with Russia and Ukraine that they'd been boiling and trying to do for a decade, everything was Russia. Bernie Sanders supporters were Russians. Trump grandmas were Russians. People in Alabama.
And we get to see that the only difference between these presidents is, which wars that they're in these parties is which war. These people don't want to fight Ukraine. You know, even the Republicans they'll tell you push more against China. You know, Iran. You know, support the state that spits on Christians.
Were Russians. The media was Russians. You got shut down RT. They just went Russia, 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 like Marsha, 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 because they wanted to start a war with Russia. Once they got that war, when Biden got in office, now everything's Iran. Instead of Russia hacking our power grid, it's Iran did this, Iran did that. So when you have a shooter that has a lot of connections to another country and Trump just sits there and repeats what you can almost guarantee the intelligence communities and the deep state or whatever you want to call it told him, I'm like, okay, this guy's not. He's not serious. But it's him versus Biden. Obviously, we only had so much choice. I'm not going to make a claim that I don't know, but everything I just stated, that's what I wanted to say. As far as what Trump does, how he handles it, it's a complex issue. Time will tell. That's the only real answer.
No, of course. And let me cut off my detractors and say, first and foremost, I have defended Trump's bombastic rhetoric when it comes to talking shit to other countries. I've got a bigger button than you when he's talking to North Korea, or you're going to regret this. This will be the last thing you ever do when he was talking to Iran in his first.
And you hear these people, they'll talk. They do have a lot of knowledge, and if you're going to vote, if you're going to, believe in the system, if you're going to believe in this political system, this is how you should think, this is how you should be informed. But they're still fools. They'll still tell you, I still need to have hope in this political system. No. This has always been the game plan. Like you told brothers, man, we like Trump, especially, all that agenda. If you weren't, especially if you weren't in the truth yet, you know, it basically, it was a big, he got land dialect, everything that they did, everything they accused Trump of that they were doing, to create a mass formation psychosis, right? But he's still an NWO puppet. They just set him up to be a leader. He's just an outside elite set up to be a leader.
Term, and I
And we said, yeah, So now we used to really hate this man. I mean, the hate wasn't extreme, like I didn't like this man, but it was a lot of jokes and yada yada. So at least came with some intelligence on my end, but we grew out of it, and then
look, this is his form of diplomacy. This is how he talks. I get that. So
so on a just presidential level, he's definitely the best vice president that we had. He's responsible for the least deaths, no more conflict started when he was president. So in that sense, that compared to these other guys and these straight warmongers that we've got, but at the same time, it's just on a roll. Now it's time. Now he's the president, and the time that we're winning the MOTB will be made mandatory. In all Jacob's trouble. You know. So no, he's a puppet of the agenda, and that's what the agenda requires. Is what he will do. You don't have no saviors.
I'm not like being a snowflake about this. I understand this is Trump's preferred method of communicating foreign policy. However, there are a lot of signs here that give me greater concern. I never really feared that we were actually going to go to war with North Korea, first and foremost because they have.
But you tell that at the same time, because we will speak on, we speak on everything. We speak on balance, we speak on concepts, so we will deal with these people conceptually and actions and then just presidency so people can grow. But at the same time, You tell people, because there's a lot that we could talk about Trump and certain ideas like DEI and certain things, but and just certain structures and certain ideologies that he's not really against, you know, because it's all just a game, like the transgender, prison thing. Like, yes, it did come from Obama, and yes, Trump did implement that plan, and he just took his guidelines, which he's supposed to come in right out the bat and start cutting that shit. But he has sodomite weddings at his house. He puts bans on countries for not pushing the sodomite agenda. So the same thing that American does, just because it's all a political game for us. He's still pushing on the will of Babylon the Great, the agenda that they're pushing out.
Nuclear weapons, and I don't think that Trump wanted to play that game. And then he actually proceeded to go and cross the DMZ and meet with him and do all sorts of great things. So maybe some great things come from this. I don't know. But your points are really well stated and really important for people to process. The other thing that I'll add to it is that Lindsey Graham, of all people, flipped really hard on Zelensky and the Ukraine war just a couple.
But this is NWO Trump, so now he's coming to fulfill all the prophecies. He's coming with great wrath. So we're not gonna get this in the 2016 that type of chill guy. No, it's NWO as you see.
Weeks ago, and he had been the biggest booster for a decade, and I'm not exaggerating, a full decade. He had been boosting, basically antagonism towards Russia. All of a sudden, a couple weeks ago, he flips on that and he starts going, oh, Zelensky, he's maybe we need to get new leadership in there. And I'm like, what's happening here? And then I started to think about it. And I'm like, wait a second. Well, I wrote it off because he's facing a primary challenger, and I thought maybe that's all it is. That the America First movement is really powerful, and he has to acquiesce to them. Then I started to think about it. And I'm like, wait a second. What if they've told Mr. Graham that they're going to pivot to the big dog, that they're going to pivot to Iran? That's what the Lindsey Grahams and the John McCains of the world have wanted for 25, 30 years. So now I'm starting to think maybe that's the reason he backed off on the funding to Ukraine. Thomas Massie famously said a few days ago that, look, we have to funnel $50 billion into the military-industrial complex every single year, and it doesn't matter where the conflict is, they're going to get their bread. And once again, Thomas Massie appears to be right. Am I reading too much into it, or do you think I'm onto something there?
No, I mean, when I posted what Thomas Massie said to my Facebook, which is a older Trump audience. I mean, there's younger people too, but it's it's Facebook, so there's going to be an older demographic. A lot of people really freaked out at the gall that Thomas Massie said that this was for the military-industrial complex. But when you look at Afghanistan, we spent decades, trillions of dollars in Afghanistan. We pulled out, and within a year, we were in a war with Ukraine. So it does seem that as soon as you pull out of one thing, that another thing starts. And even when it was with COVID, I can't remember the exact dates, but COVID mania lasted for years. And then to me, it felt like it just had kind of finished off where they're like, all right, like let's go back to normal. And then like the next day, it's like, oh, war with Ukraine. It's fun that. So it does start to seem that way. And when it comes to Trump, he's an interesting character because he's so likable, and it does seem like he is counterculture in many ways. Even the JFK and Epstein files. I know a lot of people, including myself, don't think he's really going to release them. He said he's going to do it tomorrow with the JFK files. Ukraine war needed Joe Biden in office. I think Operation Warp Speed and the 15 days to slow the spread needed Trump in office. I don't think Republicans would have listened to Hillary. Now it's like Trump's the cleanup guy for Ukraine and possibly the starter for Iran. So maybe it's just spontaneous, but I don't think you're wrong or anyone else is wrong to suspect that this is just kind of somewhat of a show. Or
but what if we just fully said, hey, this is a show. Hey, let's get into it. Even though you're not wrong to suspect, you're still given power. So these people are basically telling you to put faith in the beast with a more pessimistic mindset, with a more informed, like as you should be. If you're gonna vote, you should be informed, but you got to be above that.
Trump is doing deals with the neocons. I mean, he definitely is, but one could argue that this is a good deal. He's doing what he can. Me, I don't like Lindsey Graham, and the fact that Lindsey Graham likes Trump so much, clearly they're striking some sort of a deal. Who knows what it is? It could be a primary deal. It could be, like you said, I would think that you're probably right, that Trump's like, listen, the mother of all wars that every neocon has been wanting for the last 30 years is on the horizon. And not to add too much, because I want to let you talk, but the whole Syria thing, Trump seemed like he wanted to stop what happened in Syria. He was not able to. They got Bashar al-Assad out. That holds a lot of weight when it comes to the big war with Iran. And, they're all interconnected, but I think that was a massive, massive move. And that happened within the last 6-7 months.
Here was what Trump said on the campaign trail when he was interviewed by Tim Pool.
I look at your policies, I see secure the borders, bring jobs back. I look at the Democrats and many Republicans, and it's foreign war and foreign expansion.
That's right.
What is that?
I think it's just a failed mentality. It's crazy. You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see recently they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do that. You can talk in such a way where they respect you and they listen to you.
My mom would say, "Oh, if you hate Obama, it's because you're jealous." But how could you not be jealous of this man? How could you not be jealous of this billionaire? Speaking intelligently, about these wars, man. Well, how could you not vote? Compared to the other option, if you're gonna vote, obviously don't support that. You know, you basically that's idol worship. That's a sacrifice to a god.
Orban of Hungary, the leader. They call him a strong man. Who cares if he's a strong man or not a strong man? He's a very powerful guy. He said the problem the world has is that Donald Trump is no longer president. When he was president, China didn't play around, Russia didn't play around, nobody played around, and we had no problems. Today, the whole world is.
That was actually the same. I think it was the same day or the day before I debated Vivek Ramaswamy at LP National Convention, because Tim was. I want to point out something that I think people need to be aware of, because I know most of my audience are very high level when it comes to geopolitics, but most people, like casual observers or listeners, are not. Iran's top allies, some of them, are Russia, Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria. Syria's been toppled. Lebanon, Hezbollah, has been destroyed by the IDF, or at least damaged significantly. The U.S. is now striking inside Yemen, and Russia has been bogged down in this multi-year war against Ukraine, in which they've suffered, according to some people, hundreds of thousands of losses. Some say it's less. I'm not sure. I just wanted to point that out, because if you were preparing to go to war with Iran, knowing that their ally network and knowing what a serious fight you would have on your hands, exactly what has happened is exactly what I would advise. And I say this as someone who's very anti-war, but I would say, hey, let's topple the Houthis, let's topple Hezbollah, let's topple or damage Putin, let's get Assad out of power, who's their top ally in Iran was Assad. So all of those dominoes line up, and I'm like, this looks really, really bad. To Steelman, the opposite side of this, you could argue that Trump, with his Miriam Adelson donations and everything else, he owes a lot to the Zionist cause, and he is trying to assuage them by saying, you don't have to worry about Iran. I'm not going to war with Iran because we've already dismantled their entire alliance. I think that's the most optimistic view that I can take on this. Any thoughts? I don't know.
As somebody who loves America, it would be nice if I were more naive or ignorant, perhaps, where I could think, we're doing the right thing. That's always a great default. Like, yeah, we're at war, but we're on the right side. I mean, if you look at, after World War II, we helped with the communists. I mean, I don't know if we would say we helped them, but we worked with them to some point, established the UN. And then, the Russians got rid of the Bolsheviks and the communists, and they became Russia again after being basically infiltrated or taken over by communists who killed millions of people. Now it's almost like reverse, where Ukraine, in my view, are the new Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks and that sort of ideology has taken over nearly all of Europe. And now it's like almost the reverse, where Russia does not have that. But it seems like we're working on the side that's trying to force that into Russia. I love the West. I love America unapologetically. But if you look at America, our culture has been falling apart over.
So, how could you be for truth? How could you be for truth and unapologetically love America when then you're gonna be blinded to some extent to the truth, even if you identify as an unquote truther. You got to put down that idol. Everything that America is, God hates.
Last couple of decades, our border's been open. I would say our schools have gotten worse, our inflation's gotten worse. I still love this country and it's a great country, but it's everybody thinks it's worse. Most Democrats, most Republicans. You look at Europe, everybody talks, including all the Republicans. They say Europe's falling apart. The UK is not the UK. Ireland's falling apart. McGregor's at the White House talking about it. Pretty much all of Europe is in shambles. And then if you look at parts of Europe that aren't in shambles, let's go to Poland, who's actually our ally. Well, now Poland's getting screwed over because of the Ukraine war. They've taken in, I think, hundreds of thousands or millions of Ukrainian immigrants, and these people are taking up the welfare programs. They're not assimilating. People are saying they're being rude. So now, and they elected some Donald Tusk character who's, it seems like a sneak. So it's like that was the one ally that isn't completely destroyed. Now let's look at like Russia. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying I like them or whatever, but it's like they're, a Catholic nation. They're not completely destroyed by LGBTQ XYZ, WX, and all these like globalist EU sort of policies of open borders. And what do you know? America's funding the Bolsheviks to, attack them. So when it comes to Iran, it's like I'm not a fan of Iran. I'm not Muslim. I'm not Iranian. I'm not from there. I have no connection to their culture. And no offense to the people there. God bless them. But, I'm not in any rush to join, for lack of a better word. But to think that we were right here, we were wrong in Afghanistan, we were wrong in Syria. Everything that myself, Tulsi Gabbard, and probably you said happened. We were wrong in Libya. We've destroyed Europe. We've destroyed America. The Western world is in shambles. But this time, it's just going to be a moral war because Donald Trump and his donors say so, and the neocons. And finally, the left-wing war hawks and neoliberals, the Lindsey Grahams and the John Boltons and Donald Trump, they're all on the same page on this one, almost everything we touch, and it's sad.
The Houthis are pissed at Israel. The Houthis are trying to defend the Gazans, who are some of their allies. I mean, it's just so irritating that the narrative that, and your point earlier about how if you were going to start a war with Iran, you couldn't do it with Kamala Harris, you couldn't do it with Joe Biden, but you could do it with Donald Trump. It's so important that people understand that, because I think that's exactly what's happening. Is that like they would never buy the argument that our ships are being attacked, and we have to take out these Houthis to defend shipping lanes if it was Kamala Harris saying it. But Donald Trump says it, and they just go, yeah, history started today. That's all I need to hear.
Before I add more, I want to ask you a question, because you were mentioning that.
And people tell you to vote, and it shows you what is the benefit of voting. What is the benefit of voting between two parties? If I'm a voter, I might as well vote for the same party, because what's the point of voting? Like, why am I voting for a political party? Why can't I just vote for a candidate based on ideology? Because what is the point of voting for two different people on two different parties? And they literally every 4 years or every how many 8 years or the years that someone else is elected, they're just going back and forth and doing policies that reverse it for the other. Yes, it's good for the world in the sense that when you have a president that goes completely one way, goes left, and damages the view, you get a new face of a person that kind of lifts other things, so the America could benefit in a different way. You could open up relations again, kind of in those other countries, but at the same time, what's the point of allowing people to build up their nuclear arsenal and then going back to war with them? It shows you the democracy is not wise. But it was all for prophecy's sake, for Babylon to be burnt.
Saudis are fighting in Yemen or against them. I don't know if they're directly doing it or funding it. You named America, one of the richest, most powerful countries in the world with the biggest military. Saudi Arabia, who is easily one of the richest countries with the wealthiest people in the Middle East. And then Israel, which if it's not Saudi Arabia or UAE, I would guess Israel's up there with powerful, a lot of capability. So do you think that the US, Saudi, and Israel are just thinking like these people can't do anything?
First, was it Thessalonians? First Thessalonians 2:17. But we, brethren, being taken from you for a short time in presence, not in heart, endeavors the heart. Oh my bad. I'm sorry. Revelations 12:12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell therein. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down to you, has come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. So, you only have such a short time to beat down the nations in a way where they have to accept the MOTB in your order. You know, this is the last shake in power, and these other nations are not trying to be, you know, under Esau and Amalek's thumb. You know, Daniel 8:25, and though his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by many peace by okay, magnify his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He also shall stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Talking about Antiochus, but if you were to apply this to man.
Like the Houthis obviously stand no chance against those three countries. And then even with Iran, I mean, it only gets interesting. I don't know if I'd say interesting, but it only gets debatable if Russia or China kind of got involved. But do you think that's what our allies are thinking? Like these people stand no chance. We'll do whatever we need to do to the Houthis. And if Iran steps up, they can't compete with America.
And second Ezra 15. Um, 15:27. For now are the plagues come onto the whole earth, and ye shall remain in them. God shall not deliver you, because you have sinned against him. Behold, a horrible vision, and the appearance thereof from the east, where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon earth, that they all which have them may fear and tremble. Also the Carmanians, Persians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as a wild boar of the wood. With great power they shall come and join them in battle, and they shall waste the portion of the land of Assyria, man. So they're gonna come around the modern day Assyrian. You know? So when these Arabian countries, you know, when these Arabian countries they come, when these Arabian countries, they come as they will come in lockstep with Russia and the Persians, in World War III.
Israel and
Yeah,
Saudi Arabia.
well, I mean, it's obviously true. But then add to it that Yemen, the Yemenis, are the poorest people in the Middle East. They are the absolute poorest. Hundreds of thousands of their kids starved to death over the past decade as a consequence of this siege. So,
Right.
I mean, they have been treated with basic, I mean, I wouldn't say it's as bad, but it's pretty fucking close. What's happened to the Yemenis is what's happened to the Gazans. And yes, I know October 7th happened. I'm not diminishing any of that, okay? I'm just saying these people have suffered terribly, and they are the poorest in the Middle East. So, yes, your point is well taken. Yeah, the alliance is overwhelmingly powerful comparatively.
Like Trump said to Zelensky, you don't have the cards right now. He left his Charizard at home, so he didn't have the cards to beat Trump in the Pokemon battle. But do you think that's how Trump and everybody feels about Yemen? Where can they attack ships? Sure, but is that Trump's logical response? Where he's like, you could do that, but he's like, I could also do bigger things. So like, do you think that they will chill out because he said that, because they're so outmatched, or do you think that it'll turn into? My question is, what's your concern in the sense of, is your concern, obviously you're concerned with the live?
Before October 7th, many countries saw significant events, achievements that Many countries saw significant events or achievements that could be considered bomb and cultural. Yes, Yemen was one of the most bombed countries in the world before October 7, 2023, largely due to the ongoing conflict started in 2014. What other conflict started in 2014? The war in Yemen involves the Houthi rebels, the Yemeni government, and the Saudi-led coalition, which has resulted in widespread destruction and civilian casualties. This Saudi-led coalition, which began airstrikes in 2015, has heavily bombed the area under Houthi control, including major cities like Sana'a, Taj, Hudaydah. These airstrikes have been blamed for the cause of several infrastructure damage, humanitarian crisis, a humanitarian crisis, and the numerous civilian deaths. By the time of October 7th, Yemen had already experienced years of intense bombing, contributing to its design as one of the most bombed countries in the world. The humanitarian impact has devastated millions of people, displacing and facing shortages of food, water, and medical supplies.
Lives there and people who've
Sure.
been done wrong. But also, do you think it could end up like an Afghanistan situation where we just spend 20 years and run in circles, or do
No,
you
no.
think it's just going to drag a bigger war that has massive consequences?
That's the concern for me. Yeah, I mean, sure, my secondary concern is the lives that are being lost. I mean, and that for many people that would be their first concern. My first concern is still America and Americans. So like that's my primary concern here is that if you end up in a war with Yemen and Iran gets involved, let me just do this because it's really important that people understand. You know, I'm not being hyperbolic here. Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen, who are hated by the Yemeni people. That's not true. All emanate from and are created by Iran. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force. And there is no guarantee that that force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists from which they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They're dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, and Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire. Donald J. Trump, President.
So do you not?
It sound like a Zionist talking.
I mean, obviously, I know you to know that you don't like that statement, but is your issue with the statement not just that he's playing hardball, but that he's blaming a whole other country? Like, as
Yes.
if like, because even America, we have all these allies, but I don't think we have any say over what Israel does. I think it's really reverse, to a large extent. But even our greatest allies and Canada, whoever, no, but we don't have total control over what they do. Like, even now, all our allies seem to be disagreeing with us on almost everything. So is that your issue that he's basically saying like control them, even though they're allies, but I'm sure that they don't have total say so.
Yeah, they don't.
Over.
I mean, think about Ukraine, for instance. Like Ukraine has been funded to the tune of a couple $100 billion from the U.S. and a couple $100 billion more from the EU. Like, but we still can't dictate exactly what Zelensky does or who he
Right.
attacks or how he attacks. And so it's just ridiculous. And
You know, yeah, we do. The U.S. government necessarily, could our body of government necessarily do that? No, but our deep state is definitely doing that, and it's using them to try to incite World War III, shelling Russia and genocides against the ethnic Russians. You know, supported by the NATO to start this war. But Putin is a temperate leader, and it will be started by you know Russia and Iran. I
also
mean,
extrapolate
I'm sorry, Israel and Iran.
that logic. I mean, if you're going to argue that because Iran is arming and funding the Houthis, which I think is true to a certain extent, that they're culpable for everything that the Houthis do, well, then what the fuck does Russia have to say about our arming and funding of Ukraine for the past 2.5 years or 3 years? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a direct. Then basically Putin could say, hey, just hold up that Truth Social post from Trump and say, yeah, you guys have been striking my country for the past 3 years. We're at war now, and
Yeah.
it's hypocritical. And I know because we're the most powerful, we're allowed to be hypocrites, but it's just fucking ridiculous.
I'm not as educated on the Yemen stuff. That's why I wanted to ask you questions, kind of get into it. I know their alignments, et cetera, but I'm not too deep into what's been going on there. With that being said, I guess my concern is this, although obviously human lives are always a concern and people being hypocrites, but what we've been told by the left mostly, but also neocons is in Ukraine that this is for our best interest.
Yeah. Isaiah 10:6, it's talking about a hypocritical nation that would come over Israel. But no, this spiritually applies to our current people who have us in captivity. Isaiah 10 6. I will send you against a hypocritical nation, against the people of my wrath. I will give him charge to take and spoil, and to pray, and to tread down them, and down like the mire of the streets. So, you know, this whole, this the nation that set morality for the world is also the nation of uh, it's a hypocritical nation. You know, everything when you understand everything that America says and everything that it pushes out is lies. Because these are the Edomites.
I think Zelensky and his backers are the new Bolsheviks, and I think that they're trying to do what they did to Russia before. Like, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's against our interests. I think it's against Russia's interests. I think it's against Europe's interests. I think it's only hurt. Literally, I mean, it hurt Germany because of certain things that happened because of the war. Like, I don't really think it's benefited anybody. I don't think it's benefited Ukrainians. I can't think of a single person that it has benefited except for people that wants to get Europeans killed and destroyed. Like, that's the only thing I can really even think of. That's what I think. When it comes to what we've done in the Middle East, like, we were told, and I try to push this point because a lot of people are missing this angle because they're saying like Trump or not Trump. This is not an attack on Trump. This is just the reality of American foreign politics. They told us that Al Qaeda did 9/11, and everybody hated Al Qaeda in America, understandable, rightfully so. Like, we got to go after Al Qaeda because they attacked us on our own soil. 10 years later, a former Al Qaeda member runs Syria because the United States and our allies have been funding rebel groups and terrorist groups in Syria. So, like, I'm trying to get along with normies and Republicans, but it's hard because I'm not trying to act like I'm so great or anything, but it's like they're missing so many points of the story. It's like you should hate Al Qaeda because of what happened and everything. Yet you're ignoring the fact that our taxpayer dollars funded terrorists to let an Al Qaeda member literally take over Syria, and nobody's talking about it.
Because it's all America has no morals. It's just all for the political benefit, and it's all lies. They don't mind funding a terrorist group, and using that for justification of war. They don't even really have hard feelings about fighting as a terror group, and then funding that same terror group for if it whatever it means for their benefit.
Is that good for our foreign policy to let an Al Qaeda member take over a country when we were told they attacked us on 9/11? Yeah, nobody cares. And all these Republicans talking about Mahmoud Khalil, there's a whole other conversation about that because it is kind of a legal precedent and an interesting cultural conversation to have. But the real thing is, like, let's just say he's everything that Republicans think he is. He's the worst person in the world. He's doing all these things. Is he worse than an Al Qaeda member who's running Syria with the help of our, like? So it's like and they're going after, like, I just saw a Jewish student got expelled from Columbia. He was Jewish because he had led a protest and perhaps he broke a rule or like went into a classroom. I didn't fully look into it, but it's like, let's just say he's the worst left-wing protester of all time. Is this Jewish American who's not pro-Israel worse than the Al Qaeda member that's running Syria? like,
Deuteronomy 28:45. Moreover, all the curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord Yahweh thy power, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and a wonder, and upon all the seed forever, because thou servest not thy Lord Yahweh thy power in joyfulness and gladness of heart for all the abundance of things. Therefore thou shalt serve thy enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and the want of all things. He shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until thou be destroyed. The Lord Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee far from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. And so when I was looking at the coordinates, it goes far from the end of the earth, and not even as swift. So as the eagle flieth, so as the eagle exalted, flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. You know.
So it's like, they say the Trump administration is going after all these terrorists. Yet in reality, in my opinion, he's just using the word terrorist like George Bush and just basically trying to quash any criticism of his war. So, for example, let's just say he's completely wrong about the war. Let's just say you're completely right. I'm not saying you are, but that's hypothetical, right? Trump's administration would probably consider, and I'm not trying to like throw this label on you, but they probably consider you some sort of like they're using these words so loosely. They're calling Daryl Cooper, he's not that word, but he's that word apologist. And they're trying to get all these labels to stick so they could censor and shut people up and get people in trouble. So it's like, even if all these things were true, I can't stand the fact that Trump is now using every agency in the government to essentially police hate speech against the country that, we're absolutely at war with. And it's like, I can't say that, or I'm saying we're in a war with them as our ally. But it's like I can't even say that country controls my country. That's considered hate speech under Trump's little anti-Semitism rules. And it's like, we're fighting all these wars, and now they're trying to kneecap American citizens who speak out against them by overusing the word terrorist and saying that everyone is that. I knew Trump was going to do certain things, but once again, I think he even exceeded or under for anti-Semitism and Fruity Pebbles. But here we are.
So there you go.
By the way, the last time we fought a war in Iraq, Iran won the war and they weren't even in the goddamn war.
That's right.
How bad we are.
That's how bad we are. So, okay, Trump is turning out to be just like Joe Biden when it comes to the Middle East.
I guess your money's not going to be wasted on Ukraine. It'll be wasted on Bibi Netanyahu's bucket list.
It's going to be wasted on Saudi Arabia and Bibi Netanyahu's bucket list, which is Iran.
Yeah. And your kids are still going to go die for this crap, too.
Yeah. Wait till they start sending your kids to die for it.
Zelensky said your kids have to, but again, Ukraine's our side check. We're talking about our wife, Israel.
That's right. Hey, we've all been told that aging is just a natural process. Aches and pains, thinning hair, wrinkled skin, brittles, preservatives, and artificial on our skin and hair, but sorely lacking. That's why I want to tell you about Revive from Brightcore Nutrition. Yemen, here's some antiwar.com. Yemen. Did you remember him running on that? You remember him running on? I don't remember him running on. Hey, by the way,
Gulf of America or Greenland or this?
Yeah, I don't remember him saying, "Hey, if you elect me, I'm going to get us back into those Middle Eastern wars at the behest of Israel," because that's what this is.
Also, one little note: they're not called Houthis, and they're also the legitimate government of Yemen, as voted for by the people, and not the puppet state that's in one tiny corner of Yemen. They're not called Houthis. You know
so
that?
I didn't know that. They have waged an unrelenting campaign of piracy, violence, and terrorism against American and other ships, aircraft, and drones. Okay, that's largely bullshit, but I'm going to explain it to you in a second. Joe Biden's response was pathetically weak, so the unrestrained Houthis just kept going. It's been over a year since a U.S.-flagged commercial ship safely sailed through the Suez Canal.
As of January 2nd, 2025, a reported of 931 American and British airstrikes against their positions, resulting in 100 deaths. Does that make sense? 9 bombs for 1 death. And 314 injuries, which figures compass strikes from both U.S. and the U.K. The majority were American-led operations. The intensity of the airstrikes increased notably in early 2024 as a series of Houthi attacks on vessels linked to Israel and their allies. It's only Israel first. That's like when people say, "Oh, you got to vote." So my response is, okay, which Zionist you want me to vote for? Because Israel's the only thing that you can vote for, bro. That's the only thing on the ballot. How I want Israel to be supported.
See, or the Gulf of Aden, the last American warship to go through the Red Sea 4 months ago, was attacked by the Houthis over a dozen times, funded by Iran. The Houthi thugs have fired missiles at U.S. aircraft and targeted our troops and allies. That's like, after we bombed the shit out of them. The biggest bombing campaign and wipeout of people was Yemen up until October 7th. Up until this most recent thing with the Palestinians, where they're ethnically cleansing and genociding them and just bombing mostly women and children, it was Yemen, and that was us doing it. We were doing it with Saudi Arabia. Okay, so again, this is all about fossil fuels. That's what this is all about.
Well, also,
and about Israel, and about greater Israel.
I don't know what the right name for the Houthis is because it's hard to say, but the Houthis, they pulled off the first successful naval blockade in recorded history without having a navy.
So anybody who knows their mythology knows the Ides of March are all about betrayal, right? And everyone who thought that Donald Trump was the anti-war president needs to realize that he is against the previous wars just so he could start his own. That's what this looks like.
Yeah, we're breaking up with our side piece, Ukraine, and getting back with our first wife, Israel.
That's right.
It was fun while it lasted, baby.
Brave fighters, blah, blah, blah.
It's interfering with Israel. That's what they're doing.
That says exactly. To all the terrorists, your time is up. And you're the terrorists. You mean the terrorists that we funded in Syria? You mean ISIS? You mean Al-Qaeda, the ones we invented? And ISIS,
you should check and make sure Bibi ain't funding the Houthis because he has a history of doing stuff like that.
You mean like Hamas? You mean the ones that Benjamin Netanyahu funded? You mean those terrorists? So now all of a sudden, so that's the game. Just so you get it right. The game is anybody that we want to bomb and kill, we just call them terrorists. Anybody we want to deport or we want to put in jail, we say you're a terrorist. That's how it works.
The guy they're deporting, they used the McCarthy-era laws that they used on Jewish Holocaust survivors that were leftists to call them commies and deport them.
So that's the irony. The only difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden in this
Holocaust survivors that were leftists to call
terrorist. That's how it works.
The guy they're deporting, they used the McCarthy.
We want to bomb and kill, we just call them terrorists. Anybody we want to deport or we want to put in jail.
If there's a people that we want to bomb, if there are people that we want to just kill and take their resources, what's fund a terror organization to give us a reason to justify war. John 8:44, ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because the truth is not in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, the father of it. And man, you get to see he really invented these lies, man, because as soon as Esau got back on the scene, the lies through the universe went up 1,000,000 times.
We say you're a terrorist. That's how it works.
The guy they're deporting, they used the McCarthy-era laws that they used on Jewish Holocaust survivors that were leftists to call them commies and deport them.
So that's the irony. The only difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden in this situation is that Donald Trump is aware that this is going on.
Yeah, he doesn't have to have Tony Blinken do it.
Right. So Yemen, here's from antiwar.com. U.S. airstrikes kills 53, including women and children. Trump officials are threatening more airstrikes as the Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah. That's what
I can say that. I don't know why I thought of something. Yeah, I can remember. Ansar Allah, yeah.
They're vowing to a response.
Looks like you kids are getting drafted to go to Sandyland after all.
Looks like it. So I just wanted to show you this. So Thomas Massey says the military-industrial complex demands about $50 billion a year in war. As soon as we quit spending $50 billion a year in Afghanistan, we started spending $50 billion a year in Ukraine, just like I predicted. Watch where the next $50 billion a year goes when we stop spending it on Ukraine. The military-industrial complex is always hungry. Regarding U.S. activity in Yemen, I recently said to watch for a new military engagement to compensate for the pullback in Ukraine. The military-industrial complex demands $50 billion.
And in America, your military complex is more powerful, has more influence, has more political influence, has more political power than your body of government.
Here from our government, above and beyond what's necessary to defend our own country. So that there, Thomas.
What about our best friend and also aircraft carrier? You never had a friend / aircraft carrier, did you? That's why you don't get it.
Glenn Greenwald says the U.S. has been bombing Yemen since George Bush 43. Obama massively escalated it by aiding the Saudi war there and bombing himself. Biden bombed the Houthis 1,000 times in 2024.
Isaiah 32:5, the vile person shall be no more called liberal, and the churl, the villain, said to be bountiful.
So this idea that Trump is like,
and we get to see that America's really lost the PR on all this wars. You know, that they basically, you basically lose everything for being an anti-Zionist. You know, in all these educational institutions.
They're attacking us. No, we've been bombing the hell out of them as usual.
Well, look, once the Greater Israel Project is done, then we can stop doing this.
Stop doing this. So here, let me finish this. Biden bombed the Houthis 1,000 times in 2024, all to protect Israel from its refusal to allow food and aid into Gaza. The reason the Houthis are attacking. That's why. So the Houthis have a brotherhood with the people.
How many bombs did the U.S. drop in 2016? Let's look. As the president entered his final weeks of presidency, there was an ample assessment of his foreign military approach, which focused on reducing U.S. ground troops, with the notable exception of the Afghanistan surge, supporting local security partners, authorizing expansive use of air power, which the strategy works, i.e. to reduce threat of posed by extremist organizations formed from those countries and improved overall security and governance from the ground is certainly contested. You know, and Obama's damn. This is his last year in President Obama's last year in office. The U.S. dropped 26,172 bombs in 7 countries. You know how many of those countries are in that list? You know, of the 7 countries do name. The estimate is undoubtedly low. Considering the reliable data is only available for airstrikes in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, and Libya. So you know this man is a populist. He just wants to look good, and you know he was the last image president. You know, I mean you can say Trump, but you know it's a little different. You know, because you know people would generally say that he was a good man. You know, he was appealing. You know, people want more Obamas. You know, just good faces with charisma and leadership. You know, but people say, oh, that's just crazy. 24,000 bombs dropped in Iraq and Syria, and that's why we see, his work was complete in Syria. Fake genocides in Syria. Evil man.
Gaza, who are being slaughtered because they were the previous ones being slaughtered.
The liberal, no more, the villain, no more bountiful.
By the U.S. war machine. That's why. And
it's sad they haven't allied themselves with a greater colonial power like the others. And
say what you want about Republicans, but the Democrats, especially, parties just been flipping war. Everything about parties just flips. Democrats are the new war parties, and they just got the warmongers, man.
And they're just sitting there trying to be principled.
So when they were
assholes.
So when they were starving the people of Gaza and slaughtering them, the people in Yemen said, "Hey, we're not going to allow your ships to go and do commerce with Israel as long as they're doing this slaughter." So that's where that comes from. So that whole story Trump told you was made up. It was all made up to make the United States a victim. We're not the victim. Of course, we're not the victim. Justin Amash says, I'll say it again. It is unconstitutional for President Trump to engage in acts of war in Yemen. It doesn't matter how appropriate you think it is for the United States to take on Houthis or terrorists.
We gonna keep bringing this out. Habakkuk 2:3. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie, though it tarry, wait for it, because it shall surely come and will not tarry. Behold, his heart which is lifted up is not upright in him. By the just shall, but the just shall live by his faith. Yeah, also, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, cannot be satisfied, but gather upon him all nations, and heapeth upon him all people. Shall not all this take up a parable against him, a taunting proverb against him, say, woe to him that increaseth, which is not his, how long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay, shall they not rise up suddenly, and shall not bite thee? Awake, they shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them, because thou hast spoiled all nations. All the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because the men's blood for the violent for the violence of the land of the city and of all that dwell therein. Woe to him that covet and evil covetousness to his house, that he may be set on high on nest set his that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from evil.
Or anyone. Congress has not authorized a war in Yemen. Engaging in war there is unlawful. That's so. After 9/11, they gave a blank check to any president who wants to do a war, so Congress doesn't have to vote on it. So we didn't vote on the war in Libya. We didn't vote on the war in Syria. We didn't vote on the war in Ukraine. We didn't vote on bombing Yemen. We didn't vote on Somalia, the Sudan. We're not voting on any of this.
You know, democracy is not
And that's so nobody can be held accountable. That's what this is about. So
democracy is so really you don't have to hold your government accountable.
Glenn Greenwald says this is how the DC war machine keeps the United States on a footing of endless war, ensuring the coffers of the arms industry are always full and its own authority always increasing. What Trump vowed to stop.
The Doge cuts are nonsense, it turns out.
It turns out.
All the
They're
things
all
people are
distraction.
whining about and defacing Tesla cars about.
It's a distraction.
All they did was take the money and from the thing that I guess the Hillary Satanist cabal wants to do what Bibi Netanyahu wants. And they raised it $6 billion.
But all the cuts. So if we had, by the way, I want to say this to Glenn Greenwald. If we had to sit around and wait for congressional approval, a round of U.S. airstrikes that hit Yemen on Saturday killed at least 53 people, including women and children. According to Yemen's Saba news agency, at least 5 children and 2 women were among the dead. Another 98 were wounded by the U.S. bombing, and the health ministry said many of the casualties were civilians, while the United States is claiming it killed multiple leaders of Yemen's Houthis.
Sold in the U.S., you got to go.
Yeah. The United States is the world's terrorists. Jesus H. We bombed Yemen 1,000 times in 2024 alone, okay? A total of 40 U.S. airstrikes were reported to hit Yemen, primarily focusing on the northern Sada government strike alone, okay? A total of 40 U.S. Jesus H. We bombed Yemen 1,000 times in 2024 alone, okay? A total of 40 U.S. airstrikes were
There, Genesis 27:28. Therefore God give thee the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty corn and wine. You know, he has plenty grain and wine. Oh, you eat his bread, processed food, you know, and strong drink. The fat piece, fertile places, the richly prepared food, fatness, fat pieces, olive oil, and you know the fertile spots places, man. And what they have the carnivore diet, you know. You might just eat all fat, all meat, you know. So that is, you know, that's their blessing. You know, let thy people serve thee, and the nations bow down to thee. That's a good one. Um, Genesis 27. I should have read this one. 40. And by the sword thou shalt live, and thou shalt live, and thou shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass that when thou have broken the dominion of the yoke from thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck, you know? So he will live by the sword. And that's what he's doing, and really his sword is his tongue, you know. That's the most dangerous sword. He can't even swing a sword until he uses his tongue.
Reported to hit Yemen, primarily focusing on the northern Sada governorate. Strikes also hit the Yemeni capital. Targets that were reported hit included power stations, residential areas, and homes, and some Houthi military sites. We love hitting residential areas. So that's
Shit Sunday in my mouth.
So that's what. So there it is.
Oh, that's great. I love that Hassan Abi has kicked off Twitch for promoting the Houthis. The Houthis haven't attacked anyone after a ceasefire deal.
Yeah. No, that shows that's all made up. And we don't use real reasons to attack someone. We attack them, and when women who try to get someone to punch them in the mall so they can sue them. Critics are pointing out that the Red Sea being shut down has a minimal impact on the United States. What the media won't tell you is this shipping route is mainly used to get exports from Asia to Europe. Thomas Massey said on Twitter, its economic value to the United States is primarily in importing oil from the Middle East, but we can drill our own oil. Most U.S. imports from Asia come via the Pacific.
What about Israel? Is he forgetting about Israel?
He's forgetting about Israel. Of course he is. During his previous administration, President Trump supported a brutal Saudi United Arab Emirates war against the Houthis and used his veto power to kill legislation passed by Congress to end U.S. involvement in the conflict.
Numbers 2021 and 24:20, and when he looked on Amalek and he took up his parable and said Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. He is the first of the nations. He is the chief of the nations, and literally, when all you Babylonians are blown up, it's only for the benefit of the interest of Israel. So that's gonna sting.
Isn't that interesting? According to UN members, which are considered a low estimate, the U.S.-backed war killed 377,000 people.
Oh, Trump's also locked in with Saudis. Don't just blame it all on Israel. Don't forget the Saudis.
Don't forget the Saudis.
Don't focus on one. We are beholden to all kind of foreign power.
And half of those people, someone else's. The people in Yemen are the real bad guys on the global scale.
Got a ceasefire.
And then they got a ceasefire.
Well, I guess they're not being nice. I guess Pete, the Crusader Hegseth is being correct.
Ships. This is just you doing the bidding of Saudi Arabia.
After the Houthis until they stop shooting at our ships, and the Iranians better stay out of it.
Put this in context for me, because
so they did stop shooting at our ships. This is just you doing the bidding of Saudi Arabia now, and Israel.
Yeah, how do we get to Iran? How do we get to it?
Yeah, how can we get to Iran? That's exactly what this is.
Yeah,
to war with Iran. With Scott Clausen, I think his name.
An attack on Iran's developing nuclear program in the coming months. President Trump has extended an offer for negotiations. Have you heard anything back from Iran? Is this strike in Yemen a signal to Iran?
The Iranians have supported the Houthis. They provided them intelligence. They provided them guidance. They provided them weaponry. I mean, there's no way the Houthis, the Houthis would have the ability to do this kind of thing unless they had support from Iran. And so this was a message to Iran. Don't keep supporting them, because then you will also be responsible for what they are doing in attacking Navy ships, in attacking global shipping.
So this is how we get to war in Iran.
Finally, new Lindsey Graham is doing his job.
And now, yep.
Middle East Lindsey Graham is telling it like it is.
That's right. Russia tells the United States to stop bombing Houthis. After Trump's first major strikes on Yemen's Houthis, killing at least 31 militants, Russia is now demanding.
Ezekiel 20:38:2. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, Russia, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and say, thus saith the Lord, behold, I am against Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn thee back. I'll put hooks in thy jaws, like to lead animals. So, when I will bring thee forth all thy armies, horses and horsemen, and all them clothed in all sorts of armor, and a great company with bucklers and shields, and all of them handling swords. Persia, so Iran, Ethiopia, Libya with them, all of them with shields and helmets. These people are either being bombed or, sanctioned. Gomer and all his bands, in Togomar and all his north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee, be thou prepared, prepare for thyself, thou shalt, and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, be thou a guard unto them. Many days thou shalt be visited in the latter, and thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people against the mount of Israel, which have been always waste. But it is brought forth out of many nations, and there shall thou dwell safely. Out of many nations, and they shall dwell safely of all them.
The United States halt its military action and push for talks instead. Lavrov told Secretary Rubio that force should stop immediately, while Washington has warned Iran to stop backing the Houthis. This is how we get to war with Iran.
Meanwhile, every dumb shit liberal is worried about Elon Musk Doge cuts that are not even
That's
going
right.
to happen.
They're not worried about this.
They're not even going to happen. I mean, USAID,
No.
great. The money doesn't go to them. It's going to go in the war machine. You should be complaining about Rubio, who I thought was under control, but I forgot they're all under control.
They're all under control. That's right. Here's what he said a couple years ago is what's happening right now. Watch this.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough.
Crisis initiation is really tough.
And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran.
It's really hard. We got to get to war with them, but it's really hard for me to see how a president's going to pull this off. Well, they found this is how they're doing it. Listen to what he says.
What would be best for U.S. interest? Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode.
I like how he says he had to wait for it. We made it up.
We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And on attack. We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating.
So there you go. So I just played that Pat Clausen guy. Here's another guy telling you years ahead of time what's happening right now, and Trump is the guy doing it.
He said, but one thing we did learn, he said, we learned that we can use our military in the region, in the Middle East, and the Soviets won't stop us. He said, and we've got about 5 or 10 years to clean up those old Soviet client regimes, Syria, Iran, Iraq, before the next great superpower comes on to challenge us. And it was like, I'm coming out of the Mojave Desert. I've been training troops. I haven't been thinking geostrategy for some time. And suddenly a guy just sort of shoves this nugget at you. Well, you remember it. It was a pretty stunning thing. I mean, the purpose of the military is to start wars and change governments. It's not to sort of deter conflict. We're going to invade countries. And, my mind was spinning. And I put that aside. It was like a nugget that you hold on to. This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld and you could name a half dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control. It went back to those comments in 1991. Now, did anybody ever tell you that? Was there a national dialogue on this? Did senators and congressmen stand up and denounce this plan? Was there a full-fledged American debate on it? Absolutely not. And there still isn't. And that's why we're failing in Iraq. Because Iran and Syria know about the plan. All you have to do is read the Weekly Standard.
So there you go.
Bad we are.
That's how bad we are. So, Trump is turning out to be just like Joe Biden when it comes to the Middle East.
I guess you might talk.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with."
Brakti Hawa, Brakti Hawashai, Brakti Hawa, Brakti Hawashai, Kol Haloim, Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh. I hope this lesson was edifying.
Iraq. This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later. And by that time, we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, "I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense office today." And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." The truth is,